There is a silent prayer whispered by the unconscious mind of every living thing, a desperate plea that echoes through the corridors of our genetic history. And it is not a prayer for peace, nor for comfort, nor for safety. It is a prayer for friction. We live under the grand delusion that the ultimate objective of existence is the cessation of pain, the arrival at a state of permanent, sun-drenched repose where the nerves finally stop firing their warning signals and the muscles can cease their tension. We build civilizations, technologies, and pharmaceutical empires dedicated to the eradication of discomfort, believing that if we can just silence the screaming alarm bells of our biology, we will finally be happy. We are catastrophically wrong. The silence is not a sanctuary, it is a grave. If you were granted your deepest wish, a life completely stripped of suffering, you would not find paradise. You would find yourself rapidly decomposing in a state of horrific, numb entropy.
To understand why suffering is the architect of your survival, we must first look at the monstrosity of its absence. In the sterile annals of medical anomalies, there exists a rare and terrifying condition known as congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis, or CIPA. It sounds like a gift, a superpower drawn from the pages of comic book fiction. A child born with this condition can place their hand on a burning stove and feel nothing. They can fracture a femur and continue running. They can chew through their own tongue and swallow the pieces without a single signal of distress reaching the brain. But this is not a superpower. It is a death sentence. Without the jagged electric shock of pain, these children destroy themselves. Their bodies, lacking the critical feedback loop of suffering, fail to recognize damage. Their joints pulverize under the weight of uncorrected posture. Their eyes go blind from scratching because they never feel the sting of corneal abrasion. Most do not survive. Past early adulthood. They die not because they are weak, but because they are comfortable. They are trapped in a fatal bubble of anesthesia, where the boundaries between safety and self-destruction have been erased. This biological reality serves as the foundational axiom for our investigation. Pain is not an error code in the software of life. It is the operating system itself. However, the necessity of suffering extends far beyond the crude mechanics of physical preservation. If we ascend from the flesh to the mind, the picture becomes even more disturbing. In the summer of 1968, an ethologist named John Calhoun decided to build a heaven for mice. He constructed Universe 25, a sprawling, resource-rich enclosure designed to eliminate every form of biological adversity. There were no predators. Disease was eradicated by a team of veterinarians. Food and water were infinite. The temperature was kept at a perfect 68 degrees. It was a utopia of pure comfort. Calhoun introduced 4 breeding pairs into this paradise and waited for the explosion of life. Initially, the population boomed, doubling every 55 days. But then, as the struggle for survival vanished, something malignant began to rot the psyche of the colony. As the mice reached peak population, effectively liberated from the demands of nature, they stopped behaving like living creatures and started behaving like ghosts. A class of males emerged, whom Calhoun dubbed the beautiful ones. These mice withdrew completely from society. They did not fight, they did not court, they did not mate, and they did not care for the young. They spent their waking hours simply eating, drinking, sleeping, and grooming themselves. Their fur was sleek and unscarred, free from the violence of social hierarchy, yet they were spiritually dead. The females, lacking the protective aggression of the males, began cannibalizing their young. The colony collapsed into a psychotic spiral of apathy and violence. Whence, even when the population crashed back down to manageable levels, the survivors had forgotten how to live. They had lost the capacity for complex behavior because the environment no longer demanded it.
Universe 25 died out completely. Total extinction. The cause of death was not starvation or war. The cause of death was the total absence of struggle. This experiment stands as a dark mirror to the modern human condition. We have constructed our own version of Universe 25. We have engineered a world of air-conditioned boxes, digital dopamine on demand, and food delivered to our doorsteps by strangers. We have successfully outsourced the burden of survival to machines and systems, and in doing so, we have triggered a crisis of atrophy. Just as the body wastes away in zero gravity, bones becoming brittle, heart muscles shrinking, the human spirit withers in the zero-gravity environment of modern convenience. The epidemic of depression, anxiety, and existential nihilism sweeps. Epipping across the developed world is not a malfunction of brain chemistry in isolation. It is the frantic response of an organism designed for hunting and gathering that now finds itself trapped in a padded room. Your brain evolved to solve life or death problems, to navigate terrain, to negotiate tribal politics, to endure hunger and cold. When you strip away these stressors, the brain does not relax. It turns on itself. It begins to perceive threats where there are none, manufacturing anxiety to replace the missing danger, creating a phantom limb of suffering because it cannot tolerate the silence. We must understand that human biology operates on the principle of anti-fragility. This is a concept distinct from resilience. A resilient object resists shock and stays the same. An anti-fragile object requires shock to improve. Your bones require the stress of gravity to maintain density. Your immune system requires exposure to pathogens to learn defense. Your psychology requires the friction of adversity to synthesize meaning. When you lift a heavy weight, you are literally tearing your muscle fibers. You are inducing microtrauma. The body responds to this suffering not by returning to its previous state, but by overcompensating, building the tissue back stronger and larger than before. This is the physiological law of hormesis, the beneficial effect of a moderate stressor. If you remove the weight, if you remove the tear, you remove the growth. The modern obsession with safetyism and the avoidance of triggers is therefore a campaign of psychological castration. By shielding ourselves from the jagged edges of reality, we are creating a generation of beautiful ones, groomed and safe, yet incapable of navigating the complexities of existence, destined for a collapse we are already beginning to witness. Consider the neurochemistry of motivation. The molecule dopamine is often misunderstood as the chemical of pleasure. It is not. It is the chemical of pursuit. It is the fuel of wanting, not having. Nature designed your reward system to be front-loaded, releasing dopamine when you face resistance and overcome it. When you hack this system, flooding the brain with unearned dopamine through drugs, pornography, or algorithmic entertainment, you destroy the baseline of your own motivation. This is known as the opponent process theory of emotion. Every artificial spike in pleasure is paid for by an equal and opposite plunge into suffering. The higher you fly on cheap, unearned comfort, the lower you crash into the abyss of anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure at all. The only way to reset this baseline, the only way to feel alive, is to voluntarily embrace the difficult, to fast, to lift, to study, to build. You must reintroduce the friction that civilization has stolen from you. There is a profound metaphysical dimension to this biological reality. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, surviving the frozen hell of Auschwitz, observed that the men who survived were not necessarily the strongest physically, but those who could find meaning in their suffering. He argued that despair is suffering without meaning. If you believe your pain is accidental, unnecessary, or a mistake, it will destroy you. But if you view your suffering as the forge in which your character is tempered, it becomes the fuel of transcendence.
The fatal gift of consciousness is the ability to conceptualize the future, to realize that you will die, and to ask why. The answer to that question is never found in comfort. Comfort is the realm of the unconscious animal. Meaning is found only in the voluntary acceptance of a heavy burden. We are terrified of pain because we have forgotten its utility. We treat it like an invader rather than a messenger. But pain is the only thing that is real. Pleasure can be hallucinated, comfort can be faked, flattery can be a lie. But when you stub your toe, or when your heart breaks, or when your lungs burn at the end of a sprint, that is an absolute truth. It is the universe grabbing you by the collar and screaming that you exist. The apathy you feel, the gray fog of boredom that permeates the modern soul, is the result of a life insulated from this truth. You are suffering from a deficiency of reality. You are starving for the very thing you are running from. Look at the great arcs of history. Empires are born in the cradle of stoicism and hardship. They mature into competence and strength, and they die in the bed of luxury and decadence. This cycle applies to nations, and it applies to individuals. The moment you decide that you have made it, the moment you decide that you deserve to rest, the process of dying begins. Life is motion, and motion encounters resistance. To be static is to be dead. Therefore, the only logical conclusion is to invert your relationship with discomfort. Do not seek the path of least resistance. That path leads to the dumping ground of Universe 25. Seek the path of maximum engagement.
This is the terrible beauty of the human design. We are engines that run on the combustion of our own limitations. We need the cold to appreciate the heat. We need the hunger to respect the feast. We need the terror of mortality to instill value in the moments we possess. If a genie appeared and offered to remove every obstacle from your path, to smooth out every rough edge, to ensure you never felt sadness, fear, or pain again, you should run screaming in the other direction. That genie is not offering you eternal life. He is offering you the heat death of the soul. Embrace the friction. Welcome the resistance. It is the only thing keeping you from drifting into the void. You are not alive in spite of your suffering. You are alive because of it.